Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. In this video, I'm going to be refreshing some containers for the summer season here in 2022. Thank you guys for following along. This is Raleigh, North Carolina, Zone 7B. This is a landscape project that's been going on for a couple years now. These are containers that have been collected over that period of time. And it's time to take out some old things, put in some new things. Some of these things had violas or pansies in them during the winter time, and want to emphasize in this video about you don't have to break the bank to make interesting containers. So let's get started. Several of the containers have already been planted at this point. I've got a mixture of shrubs, leafy evergreens, and conifers, all kinds of things in these containers. If you're following along with the weekly landscape update videos, you'll see some of these containers. I wasn't going to go through all of them in a single video. I've got 5 pulled out here that I wanted to kind of go through the details on this morning. Part of the strategy for not breaking the bank with these containers is, having some things that stay in them permanently. This Alabama Sunrise Heucherella is a great example of that. It's been in this container for probably a year or year and a half at this point. It's about to start flowering now. This is a Viburnum that was rooted in a propagation series at this house 2 seasons ago, and now it's going to be go into this container, and it can stay in this container probably for a couple of years and then be repurposed for something else. Here's a Japanese maple seedling. This is from Ram's beautiful garden down in Athens, Georgia. A lot of these purple foliage upright Japanese maples seed themselves, and the seedlings can be dug up and repurposed for this. Again, this is something that can stay in this container for the next year, year and a half. There's a Swiss chard in the front of this container that was just done from seed here at the house. There's one seedling Heliotrope. This will have a purple flowers on it, smell fantastic later in the season, but again, not very expensive for one little seedling. And then there's a Cuphea that's going in over here. This was purchased. This is a slightly smaller than a quart pot, bigger than maybe a 4-inch container. All of these, you'll notice, you have the gold over here, but these other things have some sort of purple and reddish combo, including the heliotrope. So I'm going to replace some of the soil in this. That's one thing. I don't replace all the soil in these containers, but I'm going to dig out some and put these things in real quick. What you just saw me do there was take out some of the old potting soil. And my potting soil, I'm trying not to use peat moss this year, so I'm using a combination of compost and some pine bark. I know that some of you will not be able to find pine bark, but there might be alternative non-peat moss materials that you can use in your containers. The potting soil that comes out of here will just go into the garden somewhere and just become part of the, some place where I'm planting something in the future or whatever, just to expand beds. It can absolutely be reused in your garden, unless you had diseased plants coming out of the containers. Then you might want to dispose of it, but otherwise, that material will get reused as well. So I dug down maybe almost to the bottom of the container and put in about 50%, maybe a little more than 50% compost and almost 50% pine bark, and that's it. I mean, from there I'm just planting, and so I'll always pull the plant out of the container like this and just kind of see the actual depth, because if I'd have dug a hole, double the depth of what was actually in there. So I don't have to do much digging for this Japanese maple. And again, for me, this is about not breaking the bank, putting 15 annuals in here that were purchased from, quart pots. There's a gifted plant. Then the Cuphea is a purchased plant, and roots are, this one's pretty root bound. I bought this a while ago. I was trying to make sure the things I was gonna buy for the season that I was able to get. So I bought it and protected it for a while. So got to break these roots up a bit. It's gonna stick right in here. Cuphea is absolutely one of the hummingbirds' favorite, absolute favorites. And then let's get this heliotrope put in the middle here. Won't see that one for a while, but it'll get a little purple spike up on it. And this Viburnum is super interesting. This was from a propagation series from last year. So we've got this dark green evergreen element and this bright gold element, and then playing with the purples and the reds in this container. Don't forget to follow along with the channel so you can see how these turn out during the season. Let's jump to another one. The reason that all the containers were pulled together out here on the driveway to one spot is a lot of this stuff that's going in, things like this Japanese maple or this rooted cutting from propagation series. These things are just in a collection of plants. And so if you pull all these containers over here, you can move them around in several different setups and see what you like and what works together. And so again, pulling them all together was definitely helpful with that. This thread cypress or gold mop cypress was in a video tree farming it. I think last year sometimes I got it on discount from Lowe's and made a video about that. It is definitely not in as tight of a ball as it was when I first did that video. So I'm gonna do a little bit of pruning on it. This was a monotone container that has this Everillo Carex, this beautiful yellow Carex. It's got another Heucherella in the front of it right there, and then of course the gold thread cypress. It's going to get a little punch of orange color in just a minute, but first I'm going to go through here and just kind of re-establish this as a ball, as a bit of a ball. I don't want it to be completely perfectly ball shaped. It'll come back out of this pretty quick and have some character to it, but there you go. Haven't had to touch it since it initially went in to the container. One thing I wish I had done and is cut this Everillo Carex back. You know, when we want to cut our grasses, Carex can be cut back just like Liriope can. You don't have to cut it back, but if it's in bad shape, it needs to be cut back. This one was in this container, and it definitely had a little more damage on it because it was elevated above the ground. The new growth has started on it already, so I don't want to get in here and completely cut it back. But I'm going to cut off some of the pieces that are hanging over that aren't looking their best. This new growth will come out on it pretty quickly and improve the look of that. What's going in to the front is just a couple little seedling Zinnias. This is Profusion. These Profusion Zinnias are just awesome. But this is Profusion red and yellow bicolor. Let's get a couple that actually have some of that both colors on them. Just putting a couple of them in the front of the container. If you have tags on with things, you can tuck them right down in the edge of the container, and then when somebody asks you later in the season what it is, the tag's in the container with it. These Zinnias will just be a little pop of orange color on the corner, and that's it. That container's refreshed. I took a little bit of soil out of it. I've cut back my gold mop cypress a bit, got the shape on it back the way I want it, and everything else looks pretty good in here. And again, I wish I'd have cleaned this up a little better earlier, but the new foliage will cover it pretty quickly. Next up is a small round container. You'll notice how many rectangular and square containers I have. They're a little harder to use in the landscape. Of course, if you have square patios or steps or something like that, the rectangles and the squares work great. But overall, I prefer if a container's out in the garden, these round containers are definitely easier to use, easier to figure out where to use. There's a little cypress in the middle of this container, and I got a bunch of these little little conifers that I use in containers because they can stay in there like 1, 2, 3 years. So it's a purchase you can make in a little teeny tiny pot, hopefully as inexpensively as you can find them, and then get a lot of use out of them. Eventually it can go in the ground or be given away or go into a bigger container, whatever. Doesn't really matter. I'm going to get several years of use out of it. There's a small piece of wire vine in the front of this container. That's something that's planted in the ground here that can just be divided and go into that spot. I'm using another heliotrope in this container. Again, these can be done from seed. It's a little pop of purple color that's fragrant. This is a Lamiastrum. These you want to be kind of careful with in the ground. This one can be really super aggressive, but makes a great container filler and a spiller, you know, something that will spill over the side. They will try to root into the ground if you let them. So you know, keep an eye on it during the season if you don't want it in the ground, but they make just really excellent container plants because they can fill the container in really quickly, cover the soil up on the pot, make the pot look full rather fast. And again, I'm breaking the roots up on this just a bit, and you can take the tag and just slide it right in where you're planting it. Just to show you that the tag from this conifer is right here on the side. It was planted in there over, you know, a year or more ago, and the tag's still in there. So if I forget what it was, it's easy to look that up. This is a Calibrachoa. Calibrachoa are great, especially here in the South. Calibrachoa are great annuals everywhere, but here in the South, they tend to perform a bit better than petunias overall. And this is a double flower, yellow, but has a double flower, really neat plant. And again, it will kind of spill over this other side. We'll just pop him in right there. And again, tag slides right into the edge of the container. There you go. One thing that needs to be said about having a conifer in the middle of a container like this, these creeping plants that are going to be in here with it, occasionally during the season, you need to go and thin them out right around the base of your conifer. If you don't do that, it won't get any light down here and it will thin the bottom of your conifer. So there was violas in this container with this one all winter, and a couple times they were just kind of cut back from the conifer. Keep an eye on that because it can damage your centerpiece of your container. And of course, again, I'm trying to reuse that as many times as possible. Here's another container that's a season or two in play in the landscape. It's got another Carex. Carex are just great in containers. Almost everybody watching can grow these. They're hardy in zone 5 to 9. Probably in zone 5 in a container. It needs to be protected in the wintertime, but for those of us here in zone 7B, 8A, looks great even all winter long. Again, I probably would have liked to backed up time and cut this thing completely back a few weeks ago. New growth is coming on it now, so it's fine. There's a Solomon seal in this corner. Great use of Solomon seal because this thing can wander all over the garden. This container is keeping it in check, and I still, you know, Solomon seal is beautiful, but again, it can be a bit weedy in the landscape. This is an orange rocket barberry, and it's actually been in a bit more shade than it would have liked the last couple of years, and it stretched it some, but man, it looks beautiful, and I love the green down near the base of it and the change in color as it comes higher. I'm going to just barely tip prune this a bit, and all I'm trying to do in tip pruning this is just get a little more interior growth on it. That's all I'm going to do on that. And there's several other things. Here's another piece of wire vine, and this was actually taken out of another container. It was just divided from another container, and it's going to go here in the edge and just come down over the edge. There's not a lot of roots on it, and so I'll tell you what I'll do on this. I'm going to show you something. If not many roots come with it, take and just cut off about half the foliage, and that will prevent so much of the stress of it having to maintain that much green growth while it gets rooted into the container. And this will just weep down over the edge of the container. There's a little piece of a Heucherella left in this container from last year. And then this, a really beautiful caladium called Desert Sunset, should look great in this mix. Sometimes these creeping viney things like this will make it down to the ground, like that Lamiastrum, and spread out on the ground, you can just go dig them up and put them in another container the next year. That's been done a little bit on several things in the containers this season, but I just love that caladium. So I think that's a good mix right there. The last one I'll show you in this video, this is a Magnolia called Serendipity. This is one of Bobby Green's introductions. I've wanted this plant for a while. It's a really incredibly fragrant, beautiful Magnolia hybrid. He introduced a lot of the camellias that you guys have seen on the channel, and I got it in a little pot from Jason Stevens earlier this year at a plant sale, and I'm going to leave it in a container for a couple of seasons. I think it'll look absolutely fantastic, be a container as a container piece once it gets some size on it later. I can find a place for it in the landscape. I've already refreshed the soil. In this one, this is such a great container piece. This Persian Shield Strobilanthes has the purple, has kind of a grayish top to the leaf and then purple on the back, and as it gets bigger you can really see that. It does flower and there's pollinators on it, but I'm really growing this for the foliage. Just a great addition to a container, pretty fast growing too. And it's one of those you don't really have to think about. It doesn't have to be full flowered. I mean, it is a flowering plant, but you know, the foliage is just as attractive as any flowering plant, in my opinion. Here's a Euphorbia that is done from seed. Right there's one of them, and there's another one. Here's the Tradescantia, purple Tradescantia, that will come down over the front of this container and just cover up this. Look great with the Persian Shield. And of course, anything looks good with these Carex. There's another Carex going in a container, and there's really nothing brighter than this. And this, you know, the thing with these gold or variegated Carex is they'll show off all the other things. It makes this purple brighter. It makes the flowers that go with it brighter. It makes the purple Vinca that I'm about to plant show up more. And I'll tuck that in the front, and as you can see, this was come up this big this season, and it can stay in here for a couple years. And then all I have to really flip out of this container going forward, the Persian Shield will be an annual, the Euphorbia will be an annual, and a couple of these purple Vinca that are going in will be annuals. But that's an opportunity for me in the fall. I can plug some pansies in here for some winter color. This is just a little light purple or lavender Vinca, and they'll get some size on them during the season. So there's only one going in, you know, in two different spots. And last but not least is a purple Dracaena that's coming back from last year. Found this in a container as a surprise, thought it had died completely, but it's several different pieces, you know, several parts of it are coming up, and it's just gonna squeeze into this back corner and be just an upright, interesting purple foliage piece in the background of this mix. As you can see with all of these containers, there are shrubs that have been repurposed. There have been plants that were given as gifts, plants that were started as seed here at the house, plants that were dug up out of the ground and divided. A few things have been purchased, but for the most part, I'm trying as hard as I can to do this on a budget with as much color as possible. Not everything has to be a flower. Not everything has to be a giant ball of pink flowers. The colors and contrast, the foliage is every bit as important as the flowers. And again, I like to be able to reuse things. So I like a flowering thing, a couple flowering things in a container that are really draw your eye in. But the textures, the different textures of the foliage, the different colors of the foliage, you know, some are monochromatic where you have all gold foliage, or, you know, just a two-tone where you're going for purple and gold in the same container. You can do a lot of interesting things without breaking the bank. So thank you guys very much for following along with the channel. These will be distributed back out into the landscape, and thanks very much to Stephanie, who spent a lot of time rearranging and finding all of our parts and pieces throughout the landscape that we could reuse in these containers this season. Thanks for watching.